All right. Good morning, everybody. My name is Ron Peterson, and I'll be moderating today's event. I am the Executive Director of the National Utility Locating Contractors Association, or NOLCA, and I'm also the Claims Avoidance Program Director for the National Utility Contractors Association. Been in the industry about 35 years. We're going to go around the room here, and I'll just go down my list. And if you would, introduce yourself and maybe an opening statement about why our topic late locates is important and what we can do. So I'm going to start off with Kyle Coggins.
Yeah, hey, good morning. Thanks for having me. I'm Kyle Coggins. I am the representative for the utility operator. So I've been in the industry 14 years, been with multiple different utility operators across the country, and very passionate about this subject. I mean, the reason this is clearly important for me is damage prevention is about partnership. And being able to be efficient and working together allows the locators perform, excavators perform, and utility operators, to perform our work, all of it safely. So excited to walk through and talk to this panel on this important issue. So thanks for having me.
Awesome. Awesome. Next up, we have Trey Crawford.
Hey, thanks for having me. Trey Crawford with Grady Crawford Construction, underground utility contractor. And obviously, damage prevention it costs me money. So when we damage something, we're shut down and we're not doing work. So it's critical for me that our company has our best foot forward in regards of damage prevention, and honestly to try to coach other excavators into following our model with the damage loss would be be that's the main reason I'm here.
Awesome. Well, welcome. Next on my list is Nick Monstill.
Hello, everyone. Nick Bonstall coming to you here from the great state of Michigan. So I'm the president and CEO of Misdig 811. We are the one call center for the state of Michigan. Last year, we processed 1.4 million tickets, which resulted in 13 million transmissions. And that is a 9% increase from the previous year. And the year before that was a 9% increase from the previous year. So one of the main reasons I'm interested in this discussion today and talking about late locates is one of the things that is critical for us is maintaining integrity into the system, making sure that that integrity stays within the system. And one of those key pieces of integrity is making sure that the locates are completed on time and that we do what we say we're going to do for the people who are the end user of the system. So look forward to working with y'all. The collaboration piece is a key part of all of this. No one of us has the keys to the kingdom. We all have to work together to achieve it. So look forward to the discussion, and what a great panel. Honored to be here with y'all.
Awesome. Thank you, Nick. And last but definitely not least, we've got Jess Miller.
Hi, I'm Jess Miller. I'm the Vice President of Locate Services for Northern Lights. I've been in the industry for over 20 years. I've been with Northern Lights for 14. We are currently a growing locate company who's expanding our footprint across the country. So it's exciting to be here to talk about this topic. It's obviously an important piece of what we do and what we try to do here in this industry with, and focus on damage prevention.
Awesome. Well, welcome, gang. Thrilled to have you guys here, and great panel to go with. And we're not making it an easy topic today. Late locates has become more and more of an issue as we move forward. So I'm just going to start with you, Jess, and everybody feel free to chime in. One of the things I hear all the time is, why is there such a shortage of qualified locators? Is that the case? And why does our industry seem to have issues with retention?
Yeah, I think that is definitely a loaded question, especially from my perspective as a locate company. Yeah, we do find that there is a shortage of quality locators. I think from, the way we try to approach things as we move into new territories, we do feel like we find locators, but again, are they properly trained? Is there somebody who actually cares about, their approach and how they're handling things and what they're doing? So, that's always a challenge for us. So, we're hopeful that, we can continue down that path of training and sometimes relearning the process of locating. We find that sometimes when somebody comes from another locate company or things like that, that maybe they just didn't get the attention they deserve. So I think that is all a big piece of employee retention. The burnout that happens. There's obviously, especially in the north, Nick knows this, but there's two distinct seasons for us up here. You have your slow parts of the year, and then you have your busy parts. So are we staffing adequately as a locate company to prevent that burnout?
Awesome. Kyle, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I do. I have a lot of thoughts on that. I really think, it's going to be a continuous challenge with locators. And I don't think it's necessarily burnout. I do think burnout occurs, but I'm really looking at my organization. We have about 2.5 million locates, gas, electric, that we have to oversee across our entire footprint. And I think, I'm even removing myself from like the damage prevention piece. If you just look at your daily activities, burnout comes because you're doing all of these things. You're getting more thrown in at you than you typically are ready for, right? You just got a lot of things going on. So from a locate industry, the folks that I think are out there, we've got dedicated people, we've got qualified people. I think where we start getting the challenge is on the amount of waste tickets. I mean, I'm looking at my overall ticket volume, and sometimes we're the worst culprit, I'll tell you, in some of my territories, and I'll take that on the chin, and those are things we need to work towards. But I look at about 30% of the volume that's out there that we're having this, that we're locating, and excavation's not occurring on it, and you have this amount of volume that is just hard to manage. So, for me, I really think it's about being efficient. I think we have the right workforce out there. I think they're qualified. I think they're trained. But when you have, I believe it's about $85 billion of broadband, introduced into the industry, and then you've got over, I think it's about 50+ billion of water infrastructure. The system. The day I think about it is you've got your routine tickets. We can manage those, right? It's a free service. We work through those. I think that's how an industry kind of, works through these. And then you have all of this project, this infrastructure. You've got legislation that, maybe isn't advantageous to the actual work that's being done. And you got all of these conflicting priorities where, I think that creates some challenges, and being a locator, because I was a locator for several years. So I know how to go out there, jump both fences, locate all these fiber projects. I understand it. And it's tough, when all you have on your screen is 5,000-foot locates. You've got to jump multiple fences. You've got unlocatable assets. You've got all of these other conflicting priorities. And then you add that all of that was done and nobody dug on it, and you get called and you have to go again and locate it again. I think that just creates challenges, and, definitely something I think we can work through here. But those are my initial thoughts on some of the challenges that I think our locate industry and partner space.
Nice. Lot of good information. I'm sure we'll be touching on a number of those as we move. Nick or Trey, any thoughts on this?
The only thing I was just going to add is, as a business owner, and if I need carpenters, I can go get carpenters. If I need welders, I can go find welders. It's very difficult that I have seen for the locate companies to go find locators. And like anything in any industry, you got an A team, a B team, and a C team, and hopefully not the D and the F team that are locating. But, Jess, you mentioned this time of year, y'all aren't doing a lot of locating because it's winter and it's the slow time. Well, we've had projects in our winter that I think it's 80 degrees outside right now in Louisiana, where we get locators from the north that come down here and they send the A players. When we get an influx of locators from the north that come in, they send the rock stars. And then, about February, March, this time of year, they're going, yeah, we're about to lose Bill. what do you mean? Bill's the best locator out there. Yeah, he's got to go back up north. And you're like, man, we need more Bills. You know what I mean? So that's and some of it is there's a lack of promotion if you're just a locator. You know, everybody wants that next level. And, you know, when you're just a good locator, now, if you're good with your paperwork, they'll say, okay, we're going to take you out of the field, bring you in the office. But there's just, it's not in my business. If you start off as a laborer, then you want to be an operator, then you want to be a foreman, then you want to be a superintendent, then you want to be a manager. You know, there's a ladder of success in front of you. And I don't know enough about the locating industry to know how high that goes. Kyle, you mentioned, you know, you started off as a locator. You know, that career worked out good for you. But, you know, you still see locators that have been in the field for 15 years doing the same stuff. So I think that could be a part of it.
Man, I could sit here and probably talk to those 5 different things that have come up in the last 5 minutes. So I know this is going to be a great panel and a great discussion. You know, one of the things, and I'm just going to kind of off of the most recent comment there. So previous to coming over to Mystig 811, I worked with a utility here in the state of Michigan, and that utility has made a decision to keep locating in-house. And it's different than a lot of the other utilities and a lot of the other contracts that are out there. And the mind frame of what a locator is, it is really different across the industry. And I think it's something that really there should be a lot of conversation about, to your point, of what is the future of what a locator could become. And in some cases, like the past utility there, they actually flipped it around. So the locator is not the entry level point. The locator is the point after you're in operations and after you've installed infrastructure and after you're familiar with the territory, then you can be a locator. And it's because you have the knowledge, you have the boots on the ground experience, you have the ability to maybe some of that infrastructure you even installed yourself. So I think, you know, there's a different place across the spectrum, but the question is, with technology and with the changes in the environment, with the changes even in the technology path, I see us a lot of times referring to locators as they're just a locator. Actually, the locator is one of the most critical points in this whole operation, and we should be elevating them in the way we talk about them and the way we think about them. So, but I've got a lot more that we'll talk through as we go through this, but I'll start with that.
Excellent. And I'm going to add to that. And normally when I moderate, I don't chime in, but this one's a little close to home. So, you know, I think NOLCA as an association or a group has recognized we do have a problem getting people into the industry, and once they're in the industry, keeping them. You know, if I train you up as a locator, give you some utility knowledge about how that all works and get you acclimated, you're a prime candidate to move into the construction side or move right into the utility. So we lose people a lot that way. And one of our charges has been, well, number one, I don't think as an association, we've done a good job of talking about and educating what it takes to make a single locator. You know, the comment, oh, just go hire one. You know, I had a very high-ranking telecommunications guy call me and say, hey, I need you to train me 100 locators and I need them in 2 weeks. They clearly didn't value what we did as a locator and understand what it takes to make one. So it takes a lot to make locating and then make a locator. And then, as you guys have said, it tends to be the low rung. And it's a super important job. So how do we make it better, I guess? How do we raise that bar? NOLCA's response typically has been, we've got accreditation, which validates member companies' training programs. That's a great start. But how do we qualify, certify, and get that as a national thing that we want to make it a profession is what I'm getting to, and not the job on the way to something else. So we've, that brings up a whole lot of issues and problems, but that's where we're trying to head. But I don't think we've done a great job as an industry of explaining to people what it really takes to make a locator and how valuable they are. So that's kind of on our immediate radar, if you will. So, any other thoughts on that? I mean, I know we do have retention. I don't know if you know, in this industry, the locating industry can turn anywhere from 50 to 70% of its staff over on a yearly basis, and many companies are much better. But if you're turning over half your staff every year, how good can you really be? So those are some of the problems we're up against. But man, there's been a whole lot to unpack under just our first piece of this. Let's talk about, I think, Kyle, you brought this earlier, the effect of changing it a little bit here, the effect of the contractor calling in those tickets over and over. And, as you said, it's free service. But how do we control that, and what effect do you feel that actually has on the industry? Because I agree with you, it has a big effect.
Yeah, the question, how do we control those coming in? I mean, I'm in a unique position because I oversee our public awareness program. So I'm saying call in more locates, right? Let's increase that volume. But I'm also saying I need to make sure that I keep my costs low and I'm not increasing, those that ticket price essentially is what I'm working in. So I'm like fighting myself. So the way we are trying to solve this problem is, one, we do have to look internally, right? Because we are sometimes the culprit of the issues, right? We've got our contractors, our vendors, our partnerships, we're saying, hey, excavator, you guys don't do this, but we find ourselves doing the same thing. So first, we've got to make sure that we are doing our job to reduce those challenges, those waste tickets. We need to be partnering with, our local officials, our legislators to make, legislation or make changes within, our internal policies that make sense. I put it in the perspective, and I know this for a fact, at least for my organization, about 30% of the tickets that are coming in were not being excavated on. I think it goes back to the earlier discussion is, how do we get a better qualified, trained, locator? How do we invest in the locator? Well, if I can remove that 30%, and I'm having to pay those, and an excavation's not occurring, we know it's really just it's an activity that's going that we're not getting value from. I can reinvest that into my damage prevention program. I can invest that into my, locate contract. Maybe it's an internal way we, bring our resources in. But for me, we've got to really identify what is causing those inefficiencies, those waste tickets, and really drive change to mitigate that. We can keep the same amount of locators and really invest in those tickets. We need one call, one ticket called in, one locate, one excavate. Let's continue, rinse and repeat. And I think that's how we solve, at least initially, some of those challenges.
Okay. Trey, be interested in your thoughts on this.
Well, we used to be part of the problem, and we had too many locates called in that we weren't working on. And being heavily involved with our one call center, we made the list, the naughty boy list of, you had this ticket that's been called in 4 times and no work's been done on it. Well, I left that meeting with my tail between my legs and was a little bit embarrassed, and went back and got with my team. I was like, this is unacceptable, so now we manage everything with spreadsheets and weekly. The clerical person that manages and calls them in, goes through, hey, are you done with this ticket? Can I let it lapse? I don't want to. So, and another thing we don't do is we don't call in a ticket if we're waiting on permits, waiting on material. We've had clients that have told us, you need to call in a locate, so when this comes, it's ready to go. And I'm like, no, I'm not doing it. Get somebody else to do that. I want locators to know that when my company calls in a ticket, that we're serious about it. And you know, I know we're going to talk about it more, but communication is what makes us more successful than some of my competitors, is because we try to have credibility that if they called in a locate ticket, that work's going to get done. And we encourage all of my superintendents and managers and foremen, you know, text, call, you know, be best friends with the locators. You know, you a old cowboy contractor cussing out a 25-year-old locator, and this guy's 75, you're not going to make a friend that way, you know. So if you can befriend these locators, they will, you know, these guys have a lot of spare time if they choose. So we want to make sure their spare time is spent on our projects and taking care of us. So it's taken a little bit of schooling with some of my older superintendents of how you're going to get along with these guys. And you know, a dozen donuts goes a long way. A cold beer after work can go a long way. You know?
Yeah.
So that has helped us. But again, you know, we manage our ticket load so that we make sure we're not part of the problem.
Kyle, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I don't want to ask a question because I know this is you asking questions, but I think it's interesting, Trey, and maybe, you know, for me, we get a lot of contractors. It is just in case, or they'll call in tickets to survey it, get a lay of the land, and you know the updates are just to stay compliant and legal. But you guys made a big change, and you know it's rare to find a contractor that they see their work and how they manage those tickets as part of the actual activity. Was there a change in y'all's organization? I heard you say, you're on the bad list once. Was that the determining factor? Like, hey, we're going to make a big change, because we want to be a good steward, or was there something specific, that you and your group did to say, hey, we are going to be a good partner? Because it's interesting. You don't hear that too often from excavators.
And you're 100% correct. Gosh, Roger may have heard this before, but early in my career, we cut a gas line, and the name of our company is Grady Crawford Construction. And I was a, young superintendent. And when the guy came out and said, "Oh, Shady Grady, what did y'all cut now?" And I went home and I was like, "Shady Grady, that's our nickname in the industry?" Like, if I want to be a part of this business and own it one day, I can't be Shady Grady. We've got to change this. So I got heavily involved with Louisiana One Call as an excavator, which it's me, myself, and I representing the excavating community for the most part, other than the operators that are also excavators. So we have a tight knit in Louisiana, and we work all over the Southeast, but we carry that attitude wherever we go. Is that, we want the locators to want to locate for us versus a competitor.
An excellent question, Kyle. And by all means, if any of the panel has questions, feel free to step up with that. And I will tell you, one of the things that NALCA as an association finally set out to do was make better relationships with the different contractor associations. I speak at a panel of PCCA every year. I go to NUCA, AGC. We've had relationships, so we're always trying to increase communication so that we can educate them, they can educate us, and we can all work better together. So I didn't mean to skip you, Nick, on this. I know you probably see things from a different. Well, you see it in another way, so not from a different perspective necessarily. But what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I definitely have some thoughts here, and one of the things that I do want to highlight here in the state of Michigan, because it is vastly different than others across the nation, is our current board chair is an excavator, and our current vice chair is a locator, and that is a really, really good piece of insight to have when we're trying to make system changes, when we're trying to understand system impacts. The amount of good debate and conversation that comes out of that is invaluable for the direction that we take as an organization and as a system to serve our members and customers. So I would encourage more participation from excavators. I would encourage more participation from locators. That is the collaboration in the system. We serve as the center point of that collaboration. To the point of over notification, there are some, this is something that definitely needs more light shined upon it and needs a little bit more action behind it. Number one is just the fact that there are certain places that don't have any legislation or rules around how you keep a construction site active, or what the rules are around how quickly you have to begin construction when you place a ticket. So here in the state of Michigan, we have legislation that's called a 14-day rule. And basically, once you place that ticket, you have to begin construction after 14 days of that ticket within that 14-day window. So that does lead to some assistance in the over notification area. The other thing, we invested into electronic white lining back in like 2021, like 5 years ago. And electronic white lining is actually really, really helped in, as you guys know, it used to be the full parcel, right? And you would have a huge area that you would be responsible for. Now with electronic white lining, those bounds create more of a limited feel of that ticket, which allows the locator to obviously go to the next ticket faster. There is one thing, though, that I do find very interesting, and it's something that we've seen in the system over the last couple of years for sure. We actually have a quality control team. So that team, all they do is use data, and we do have some technology behind it that allows us to find some of the misuses and abuse of the system and deal with it head on when those tickets are placed. The one thing that I find interesting is we've had a design ticket here in the state of Michigan for, I think it's going on like 20 years. We've had a design process, a separate design process for design tickets. What I've seen over the last couple of years is what I would consider like a design on the fly type of use of the system, to where you'll get someone to come in and they'll say, okay, this side of the road for 4 blocks, this side of the road for 4 blocks. And they're going to make a decision on that bore path based off the information they get back from the locates on the site. And we highly discourage that operation, because what it does is it duplicates and ineffectively uses resources in the field. The design processes for that, where they actually get the mapping and they actually get the overall mapping from all of the people within those blocks. The difference is the design process takes 10 days to complete. The ticket, obviously, you get within 72 hours. So we do watch that quite a bit, but I do think there's more that we have to do around keeping the integrity on the production side of the system and keeping the design side on the design side of the system. So those are things that we're working on internally.
And Nick, I saw a quick question fly by.
Oh, sure.
They often do. Is white lining a requirement in Michigan as far as law?
It is. Yeah, white lining is in Public Act 174. Yep.
Okay, very good. Jess, I've left you out up to now. Thoughts on all this?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think all of these are great points. I think, I appreciate Nick bringing up scope. Scopes are, the easy button is to call in entire property, both sides of the road. You see that on so many tickets where, they're planting one tree over in the corner. If we can limit those scopes, we can get those down. It frees locators up to go to the next locate. I mean, it's such a crucial piece, but it's the easy button for the excavator to call in entire properties. I think another aspect of it is project tickets, especially with the broadband money. We are seeing thousands of tickets called into a town that may normally see 100 for the entire year. So you're seeing this flood of tickets and expectations that those start times don't change. It's still a 48-hour window. It's still a 72-hour window, depending on what state you're in. So now you have 1,000 tickets in an area that doesn't see 100 in a year, with one locator who probably goes over there a day or two a week, maybe, to do a few tickets here and there. Now you're expected to have 16 to 20 locators to do these projects. We have all of these bore crews. They want to bring in 5 bore crews. They want to bring in, and do this all at one time. So the expectation is unrealistic. So I think we do need to see a lot more states adopt a project type ticket where we get extended timelines to get these done. But, you know, again, that comes with collaboration on all sides. We need to see more of the scope of work, more of those upfront communications with the telecoms. You know, where are we going? What are we doing? And a lot of times they treat those as a trade secret. So a lot of times you don't know they're coming until they hit the button on all those tickets.
Yeah, and just from my perspective, I see that as a huge problem, and there's a couple other issues I want to make sure we get to. But yeah, I've seen that in the past. You know, there was a huge deal back. You know, Google was on the Kansas side of Kansas City. They were the first area that Google came into. And now, you know, looking forward, you have a little bit of revisionist history. It's, oh, that was horrible. Let me tell you, when Google came in, they said, hey, guys, we're going to be here in 6 months. Get ready. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to be there in 3 months. We're going to be here next month. Here we go. They gave the excavation community, the locating community, advance notice of what was going on. What wasn't anticipated is their competitors decided to do the same thing with absolutely no notice, which flooded that, combined that with a gas company that decided to go polyethylene over their steel service as a project. And the next thing we know, we have more work than can possibly be done. So, you know, I see one of the big problems is no advance notice. Again, just go hire some more locators. Can't be done. Now you have the influx of BEAD where you have massive amounts of construction companies coming into rural areas where there might be 1 or 2 locators allocated for that area. And the argument has been, we'll just reallocate. Well, we didn't lose any work in all those urban areas. We're still full up, and now we've got this. So I do see that as, you know, if people would just tell us what's coming, and I fully get the whole competition thing, but if they just tell us what was going on, we could better plan. And I do think that locate companies in general do a pretty good job of forecasting in combination with the one call centers and the utilities. I think they do a pretty good job of forecasting. But when you get all, you know, for example, all this BEAD money coming or all these other projects just out of nowhere, you catch us flat-footed, and I think that does become a problem. And I'll let you comment on this, but one of the issues I see with locating, you know, we have exactly 2 to 3 days to know what's here. We don't get advance notice, and we also, you know, if a client goes to Trey and says, and Trey's full up, he's got all the work he can handle, says, hey, I want you to do these projects. Trey's probably going to look at him and go, you know, we're 6 weeks out, all good. You know, he can turn the spigot off. We have no control over that. Once it hits our capacity on Monday, those tickets keep coming. We don't get to have any effect on that. So it's very difficult to plan. So just my 2 cents on that. If anybody wants to comment on that, I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, I just want a little perspective because I'll tell you one of my areas we operate in, the challenge that we have by not having some sort of project control, a project ticket, or, you know, life of a ticket, no white lining, right? You've got all of the lack of the processes that I think we should have in process. So what you start doing is you try to partner with all the utilities, right? Where you're like, you know, let's get the line locate vendor. Let's start trying to get 3-day plans. Let's create a project. So, you know, as a operator, as a damage prevention group, you know, you're going to these folks saying, hey, please work with me, if you will, to try to get something in place. You might even work with the city to get specific permitting that requires footage. And then, you know, I can think of the areas I operate in, like for Houston example, I mean, Houston proper, there are hundreds of cities, hundreds of municipalities. So, you know, how do you realistically go approach every one of those, try to get some control because you don't have those project tickets? So a couple of experiences we had really good success on some local level when some of these fiber projects came in. We created an agreement where the excavator, the utility, and the locator, we all agreed that, hey, we're going to give ourselves a little bit time. And we saw this work very well. And we also had the city create some permitting language that says, right, here's kind of all the parameters we can work in. So we had to go outside of the formal process and create this ourselves. It worked very well for about, I would say a couple of months, and then you started seeing real production occur. So the excavator, knew exactly where they were going. So they said, hey, we can add more crews. So they started calling in more locates, and then the locators started getting back further. And then the city said, hey, we're going to have to implement more, permitting or city ordinances or controls in place because this is getting out of the process again. And then ultimately, you started seeing other cities creating their own, permitting processes, which was prohibitive to production. So, I think it's important that, we do understand what is a project. We look at that separately, because if we don't, you are going to see all of these back end processes, all these additional challenges that really does make this a challenge. And we were successful briefly. I think everyone agreed to it. And then it's just more and more and more and more. And it's definitely a challenge for us to keep up with. So, we feel the same pain over here, even as an operator.
Other thoughts or comments on this?
I would just say what we fight is exactly what you were talking about. And we have to tell our clients sometime we can't put any more rigs in that market. And we do a lot of broadband work, but we also do a lot of sewer, deep sewer, and any underground utility, we bury it. So we're not just a broadband contractor, but more on the broadband work is where we have to say we're at capacity. And look, we make more money the more it gets bored in a day, but it's not worth public safety, damage prevention. You kind of have to practice what you preach. So there's plenty of times where we tell clients we can't take anymore. We're at capacity. We're getting good production. But if we flood 2 or 3 more rigs in there, it's going to be a problem. But we also do what you said as well. If we've got a big project coming, we let all the utility companies know beforehand and let them know that, look, we're a month out or we're 2 months out, and this is going to be a heck of a build. And then the gas company tells us, well, don't start on this street because it doesn't locate well. And we'll work around that so that the utility company can go in and say, well, all right, we've found tracer wires. We feel a little better with where it's at. And that works well. But again, we're communicating with everybody.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I want to switch gears a little bit because I think there are 2 kind of hot button issues that I think we need to address. I don't want to be accused of taking it easy on any party. One of the issues I hear when I put my contractor cap on is the misuse of the system, and don't cringe here, Jess, but the misuse of the system by locators. In other words, in some states they'll put excavator agreed to different time or to extend time when the excavator's got no idea what's going on. Using the system to create a false sense of on-time locating, if you will, or putting them off when there's been no communication. I'm just curious what your thoughts are on it, whether you're seeing it, how you deal with it. Jess, since I'm hitting us as an industry, I'll let you lead this one off.
Yeah, I think it starts at the state level. I think Nick and his team at MISTIG and other area 811s need to look at, if there are going to be extensions, there has to be some kind of agreed upon documentation that both parties sign off on. I think from our perspective, that's kind of how we approach things. But yeah, a lot of times it is far too easy because, again, when a locator has 300 tickets on his board, and 75% of those are late, he's going to throw some notes in there to appease a supervisor, to appease hey, I'm trying my part here, but far too often, yeah, it happens.
I don't know what you see from your end, Nick, but I'd be curious. I tend to deal with the different states when I'm in them. So yeah. So what do you see? What do you have in there? What are, just what's going on over there?
Yeah, absolutely. So this actually goes right in line with, what we've experienced over the last 3 years. And we actually took, so if you look at our project tickets, we have a separate project ticket for 180-day projects. And there was a positive response code called the 005 code. And that code was ongoing coordination. So right to the point of what you're talking about, what would happen is you would get pretty close to the end of the time the ticket was supposed to be delivered, and you would get a message in there that basically said, hey, 005 on the positive response, we made contact with blah, blah, blah. And what we were seeing was a very large call in from the person who was supposed to be getting the contact saying, no one ever reached out to me. No one ever tried to call, blah, blah. So we said, all right, we got to relook at how this actually functions and what is like the key driver. I'm very big on like the user interface and the user experience of why is this here to begin with? Like, what are we trying to solve with this function? And it really is the fact that we're trying to communicate using a system that's one way as a two-way communication point. Well, if we're doing that, we need both sides of the communication. So we're actually bringing back the ongoing coordination code this year, but it's actually got a notes and comments response field from the excavator side. So the locator can say, hey, by the way, I need some more time on this, whether it's rain or, weather or whatever. They can now communicate. They can upload attachments, an alternate marking schedule. The excavator can respond back saying, yes, approved, or no, I don't think this is going to work. We need to keep on. And it becomes now the two-way communication tool between the locator and the excavator on a large project 180-day tickets. So at the end, you're going to have a project ticket that might have a bunch of comments through the history of the ticket back and forth. But that's the value of the system, is trying to communicate and collaborate to get to the end result, instead of gaming or using the system just to track a completion metric, which is not what anyone's really after. Everyone's really after keeping the project moving, keeping it safe, making sure no utilities are impacted. So we're constantly trying to redesign and really look at, and this comes with listening to the people who are using the system. People who have mud on their boots every day in the field in those projects are probably the best people to give us input on how the system operates. So we're going to continue to design and reflect those experiences in the way the system operates in the long term.
Excellent. Trey, Kyle, thoughts? All right, hearing none. Oh, go ahead, Kyle.
No, that's fine. No, go ahead.
Okay, I've got one other issue revolving around locators, and it's been brought to my attention several times. It was actually just flashed through on the chat that some locate companies are now out there going to the contractors saying, look, I can't get to your ticket, but if you'd like to pay us, now we'll move you to the top of the list. Are you hearing any of this? What are your thoughts on it as a process anyway? So I'll let you guys go with that one.
Yeah, as an excavator, I have not seen that. It's probably pretty lucrative, because if my stuff's not getting located, I might think about it. But again, that's where we get into that, get them donuts, whatever you can to make a friend out of the locators. That's our biggest advantage and we spend a lot of money supervising, to where we'll send a superintendent or a manager to go by a project. It says positive response, says everything's located. But before I send a crew with an excavator and trench boxes, I don't want them waiting. So we do a pretty good job of pre-surveying to make sure that nothing drives me nuts more than a superintendent calling me saying, my dig ticket's good and we're waiting for locates, and the crew's out here on site. Well, did you check it yesterday? Well, the positive, if you come to me, you better have checked all the boxes. And that gets back to, I've gotten phone calls about too many tickets. If I get a phone call and a complaint on a ticket we called in, I take it very passionately. So my employees that manage tickets and manage all this and pre-survey, I have a very short fuse if they haven't truly done their job.
Mm.
Yeah, I would just add, I think this is a product of just the challenges that all of these waste volumes, all of this, additional funding from projects coming into all of our states has kind of created this environment where there are processes outside of the way the system's supposed to be used. So I think the environment's kind of creating this. I will tell you as a utility operator, I don't condone that or agree with that. If my utility, my locate vendor is prioritizing, first off, I'm paying them to do a locate ticket, which I want them to, right? But they're also charging an excavator to prioritize those. I think it introduces a lot of risk, not only just from we're going to prioritize certain projects, but I think just from a vendor relationship, just the way that, those funding mechanisms getting paid, several times, I think it creates some distrust in the process as well. I've heard in some of my service territories that likely is happening. I don't think it's happening with any of my vendors. I hope not. But it creates a lot of confusion in the process. There's already enough confusion already. And then, you're prioritizing this, you're paying extra. I just think that's going outside of what the industry is trying to do. If we do our job appropriately, we coordinate appropriately, we utilize the system the way it's designed, where appropriate, we update those processes and procedures, the system is going to work itself. I mean, I'm looking at Trey and his organization. I know how Louisiana works. It's not the most, nothing against Louisiana. Love you guys. The legislation and the process isn't the most robust. It's not as mature as maybe up there in Michigan or some of these other states, but working within the process works. I think, going outside of these processes is definitely a challenge, something I think, hopefully it's not occurring. And, as a utility operator, I don't think that should be occurring.
Yeah, I mixed emotions about it as well for the exact reasons you stated. I will say though that there are some interesting things going on. If you look in Alberta, they're doing an alternative locate process, but it goes through their system, which allows you to take another way. If you look at the Australian model, the relationship is between locator and contractor. I think they miss a little bit with the utility because the utility simply provides records. And that's about the extent of it. But I do agree with you. We have a system. If we can maximize the system and make it good, working outside of it, I don't know. I think it shines a bad light on my members.
Yeah. And because I want to hear Nick's response, because I'm sure he's got a really good thought on this one. But, I also understand the purpose. And even if, that is an opportunity, I think that needs to be a stakeholder discussion. I think if you bring in all the players, you can work through, hey, how do we prioritize this? Maybe there is an opportunity to have some additional cost savings so we can reinvest in, locators and, into the process. But I'm not opposed to new ideas, new opportunities, new ways of looking things, but I think the collaborative approach, bringing the stakeholders in and solving that problem, would be definitely my preferred method of, tackling that.
Excellent. Nick?
Yeah, I mean, I probably couldn't have said it any better than what you just did. So there are some things that I think we always have to be looking for, like if we just get trapped in the ways that we currently do things and we're not looking outside for different ideas or different thoughts, we're not really moving the industry forward, and we're going to be sitting here in the same meeting a year from now or 2 years from now complaining about the exact same things, right? So I think the two opportunities that I see that are very interesting to me right now are, and Ron, you just brought it up, is I think Alberta is onto something as far as having some sort of structure that is able to be activated probably from more of the center approach. And really, when you look at like the legality of it and the activation, then everything's on the up and up. Everyone's kind of seeing all the action, the whole 9 yards. But I'll tell you, I mean, just individually from a CEO of a one call center, when there's a break in the process, and everyone's experienced this. Everyone likes to look at the process as being like the 811 is the center, and then you've got all these offshoots that are, water, gas, blah, blah, blah. It's actually not the way. That's not actually a good depiction. The depiction should be that it's that spider diagram, but there's a big circle that goes all the way around it and connects them all, that's interconnected. Because all it takes is one of those fingers to drop and the whole process is shot, right? So if you get one of those that occur, guess who fields all of those phone calls from all of the angry people who are on the other end of that project? It's the center. And the center doesn't have a lever to pull usually in that circumstance to say, look, we want to make this right. How do we make this right? We can coordinate. It's going to take some time to get through whatever decision was made to cause the issue. But I do think Alberta's onto something with just some lever to pull to be able to make things right and keep the projects moving on time.
Yeah.
The other thing that is very interesting to me that I'm very deep in the weeds on right now with this is I look at our nation's 911 system, and I look at how we deploy resources within the United States for an emergency incident. And I'll give you just a real quick overview. Ron, if you were to have a heart attack right now, you would probably have a pickup truck and 2 or 3 people show up at your house. They would deploy an AED, and you would be on your way, hopefully, to the hospital. Your house catches on fire. You no longer are getting a pickup truck. You're getting about 8 apparatus and 25 people. The response is different based on the risk and the potential of whatever the consequences of that risk. I have a hard time not drawing that same analogy with the future of our systems. Mm-hmm. And when we look at the locator is the resource. The locator is that emergency responder in that situation. They are the asset. And we've all agreed for like the last hour that we have a limited supply of this resource, that the amount of this resource is not likely to improve over the next year or two. So what is the most advantageous way that we can use that resource in the most data-informed way for the potential and the consequence that exists with whatever the infrastructure is that project is being done around? Those are the 2 things that I'm very interested in and looking a lot deeper into the future of the systems.
Nice. And I have been I've gone way over on my time on this. Roger and Tyler are going to shoot me. So obviously we could do part 2, 3, and 4 of this, and maybe we will. But just to wrap up, I'll give you each just a final thought. Start, Kyle, with you.
Yeah, I've got about 2 hours worth of thoughts left, but what I would say, and I think I agree with what everyone said, is thoughts are great, but we really need action. So the things that we can do within our organizations, really what I challenge you, is do it. I'm thinking of Trey's organization. He's doing things that are not required by policy or procedure or legislation. He's going above and beyond to work with the stakeholders. Me as a utility operator, I recognize we have opportunities, and I'm going to actively pursue those. So, what I would say is, let's not say, hey, we need legislation or we need 811, whatever call center in your state to do these things. I just challenge everybody, find out what you can do in the organization that helps some of these challenges. My view is that if those locators are doing their job, they have what they need, and they're locating that one time, they're going to be a way better performer. And my job as an operator is make sure that we partner with them, they have what they need, and that we're doing what we can to support them. So I would say take action, do what you can now, and let's build a bigger process down the road.
Very good. Jess?
I think I agree with Kyle. I think my big takeaway is, how can I look inward and make sure that we're giving our employees the best possible chance to succeed with the system that we currently have. We all want to see changes in our system. We all know that there needs to be changes, but right now, what can we do to give the employee every chance they can to succeed? So I think that's my big takeaway.
Excellent. Trey?
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of like you guys. I could sit here and talk about this for a long time. But the good news is nobody on this panel, we're really not complaining. We're not nagging. We're not saying, well, you know, but if you do more than the bare minimum, it works. And that's, I've told y'all some of the things we do, and it seems to work. And all I'm really trying to do is I don't want my superintendents and managers calling and complaining to me about locates and locators. So what can we do differently that don't call me? If you're going to call me about a ticket and you need me to call somebody to get it located, you better have done a lot of things before that phone call. That's my biggest takeaway.
Very good. And last but not least, Nick.
Well, I'll just say that we just had a conference last week, and we really tried to highlight this at the conference as well. But here in the state of Michigan, we got $1.5 billion in BEAD grant funding coming in. It's the fourth largest deployment of BEAD grant funding in the nation. And I can provide as much awareness around the optics of how much that's going to impact us. But what it really takes is, to the points that were just previously spoken, it takes the sharing of that plan. It takes the sharing of the maps and the location of where you're going, not necessarily with us, but with your partners. So it's even the locators and the contractors, and getting everyone understanding this is where we're going, this is our plan, this is how we're going to accomplish it. Don't keep it internal. Make sure you're sharing it amongst yourselves, and I think that will greatly help us get through this construction season. So, and thank you guys for the rest of the panel. Really enjoyed listening to what you guys have to say and your different views.
Yeah, and just to wrap up, man, I appreciate everybody's participation. Great perspectives, great conversation. We didn't even scratch the surface on this thing. So I look forward to hopefully further conversations with this.
Thanks to all of you, our panelists, and our moderator for sharing your expertise. Please take a moment now to fill out a brief survey that will be posted in the chat so we can continue to improve these discussions and address topics that are important to you. Be sure to register for next month's Town Hall by visiting our website. Again, thank you for joining us, and we will see you next month.